You ever been super excited for a game? You've seen the trailers, you've heard the news, you're squirming with excitement, and the release date of the game just could not come any faster? And then you play the game and...
Oh no, no, no.
The video game industry is a lot like the movie industry. You got a lot of hype and then massive letdown. And video games just seem to sting worse because it's something you'll be stuck with more than the 2 hours a movie lasts. For this list, I'll be looking at the top 10 disappointments I've personally encountered in video games. Not every game on this list is necessarily a bad one. It's just one game I popped in upon buying it day one, just sat there and realized, oh, this wasn't what I was expecting at all. I'm Boyo and these are the top 10 disappointing games I've experienced so far.
Sequence start. 10.
Now I know this is a cliched game to put on a list of disappointments. You might be thinking I'm some kind of Melee enthusiast dick. Well, no. Melee had its own share of problems and Brawl had a lot. What's ironic is that this game received more play than Melee ever did in my house. The common complaints of Brawl was that it was too random. That was fun for my friends and I, for you see, I played Melee. A lot. As a Falco main. You can imagine how that must have gone.
Nobody wants to play with me.
Sure, maybe I could have played as someone else, and sure, maybe being one of the few among my friends who actually owned the game gave me an unfair advantage. But the fact of the matter was that Melee allowed for a lot of room to get better, and it reflected when we would play together. Then along came Brawl, and it leveled the playing field by introducing the random elements such as tripping. The characters didn't feel so overpowered, although trust me, I know that this game is more unbalanced than Melee. But among ourselves, we never pushed the game to that limit. We never had a banned meta night among ourselves, and it was just an overall better experience. So why is it on this list? Well, from the moment I unlocked Falco, I knew things were going to be different. I still remember that sinking feeling when I finally unlocked him after completing 100 multi-man melee, knowing that this wasn't going to be the same as Melee. Although I still enjoyed Brawl, that empty feeling would persist. The level of control that I had become accustomed to in Melee was gone, and I knew it wasn't going to come back.
9.
Another example of a good game, but dang, that's a massive disappointment. This game is good. It's just not Snake. I know it's another cliched entry, but hear me out. The first MGS game I ever played was Solid 4, which we bought around the same time that we bought Brawl. Snake's character was just so awesome. The snarl, the humor, the sneaking, it was all awesome. I then played Metal Gear Solid 1, and it was even more amazing than 4. Then I played 2, and holy crap, this looked like it could be the best Metal Gear Solid game, and Snake, where are you? What happened to you? Why are you blonde? Why are you whiny? Yeah, I know, this guy gets more hate than he deserves, and I truly do understand why Kojima replaced Snake for the sequel. If you threw in a battle-hardened post-Shadow Moses Snake in MGS2, it'd just be a rehash of MGS1. MGS2 allowed for a fresh, believable perspective, and allowed the narrative to follow the themes much closer by introducing this particular character. But boy oh boy was it heartbreaking. Obviously this game is the least popular of the bunch because of this reason. I bought the game at GameStop for about $2.50 even though the game was marked as $5. It's a good game and good games normally don't go for that cheap, but obviously it's one people tend to avoid. Oh, and this was before the release of the PS3 editions. This was back in 2009. I know they had already released a special edition, but even the normal edition of MGS3 sold for way more than MGS2's normal edition at GameStop.
8.
As a kid, I could tell you exactly which series of games were my favorite ever in the whole wide world, the Wario Land series. Don't ask me why, there was just something amazing about these games that gives me nostalgia boners that last for longer than 4 hours. Nothing in the world made me happier than hearing that there would be a third and fourth game in the series with better graphics, and then the hype train rocketed into outer space and soared into the heavens. Wario World. Magazine pictures had me going insane. A 3D Wario game. Oh my god, I can't wait to play this game. And you know what? The game itself was not that bad. just one problem. It's so short. Booting up the game was like a dream come true. Beating the first world filled me with bliss, which took me about an hour, and as I made my way to the second world, I noticed that there were only 3 worlds left. Oh... I remember thinking to myself, if I don't slow down, I'll be done with this game that I've been waiting for my whole life in 2 days. Yes, that was the moment of crushing disappointment. Let me put it into perspective. The Wario Land games were games I hardly ever finished as a kid. They were super long, with Wario Land 3 being the one I completed 100% in the year 2013 after buying it in 2000. Wario Land 2 had multiple branching pathways and was just packed with gameplay. Wario Land 4 also had 4 worlds, but each world contained 4 levels and a boss as opposed to Wario World's 2 levels and a boss. This was not the game I'd been dreaming about and was sorely disappointed to realize that the handheld Wario games were going to be the best in the bunch. And like I said, the game is fun, but the length of the game was way too short and I felt it from the very first day.
7.
FZero GX is one of my favorite racing games ever and a game I consider to be better than anything Mario Kart ever put out. It's fast and awesome. So when I saw that there was a new F-Zero game on the GBA, FZero GP Legend, I thought to myself, hey, it won't be FZero GX, but it'll probably be like F-Zero Maximum Velocity, another F-Zero game on the GBA that was awesome. I was only halfway right. It wasn't like Maximum Velocity. Why? Because it tried to be F-Zero GX. You can't put GX on a handheld. One of the cool things about GX was that 30 racers occupied a track during a single race. It made for really intense gameplay considering that you could end up in 22nd place and have to really struggle to make your way back up in the rankings. FZero GP Legend, being a simple GBA game, would only load a couple racers at a time, meaning that you would only encounter the straggling racers if you really sucked or you were about to blow up. It was rare to ever encounter anything below 6th place. This game tried to do too much on something that clearly wasn't intended to handle all that. The game itself wasn't that bad, but it was also too easy. It's a game that I beat once and have rarely ever checked it out ever again. It was like Diet RC Cola. It's not GX and its attempt to pretend to be aren't even that good.
6.
The WarioWare series has always been awesome, when it stays where it belongs, on a handheld. But then lo and behold, WarioWare Mega Party games on GameCube appeared. We got this sucker, popped it in, and disappointment was about to roll on in. The single player mode was nothing more than a cheap rehash of the GBA game. And then we played the multiplayer and holy crap, this was one of the most fun multiplayer games ever! The only other game that ever got more play than this was Smash Bros. And Mario Party. So when I heard that there was going to be a Wii Warrior game, I was right there first in line to get it on this new console. And it did not live up. But to be fair, the game did have a handful of good multiplayer games. Okay, more like one. But the game overall was designed for the single player experience, sorta like the other WarioWare games. Whereas Mega Party games focuses on multiplayer, Smooth Moves was single player. And the tricky part was that it was on the Wii, a console that had been marketing itself as a party system. I thought this was going to be the best WarioWare multiplayer game ever. It didn't replace Mega Party games and talking about it is like pouring salt into an open wound.
5.
Remember back when Guitar Hero and Dance Dance Revolution were all the rage? Well, Nintendo wanted to get in on the rhythm game biz and release Donkey Konga. I was looking forward to this game for weeks. Nintendo Power made it seem like it was going to be one fun experience. What I got instead was a game chock full of bad covers and mediocre songs.
Kirby, 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 that's a name you should know. Kirby, 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 he's the star of the show. He's more than you think, he's got maximum pink. Kirby, Kirby, Kirby's the one.
But perhaps what was most disappointing was the way the game was designed. Now, the bongos, as far as I know, are a rhythm instrument like drums in a rock band. They serve to keep a solid beat going among riffs and whatnot. In Donkey Konga, they serve more like the main instrument. I mean, listen to this. Notice how the beat plays along with the main instruments? It just sounds awkward and to me the equivalent to tapping a pencil along to a guitar. Unlike a game like Rock Band where playing the drums creates the illusion that you are actually playing along with the actual track drums, with Donkey Konga I always felt like an idiot and the game was not very good. I played a couple times and the novelty wore off fast, leaving only a sense of disappointment that Donkey Konga was more like Donkey Konga.
4.
One of my favorite games ever is the Resident Evil remake on the GameCube. This game is so scary, man, it literally had me jumpy after playing it. The aesthetics of this game is designed so amazing and I'm still impressed that this was a GameCube game. Even though I'm using the HD remix footage, but whatever. And y'all know where I'm going with this. Nope, it's Resident Evil 5. Some of you might be thinking 6 was worse. Well, yeah, I hated it much more than Resident Evil 5, but at least with Resident Evil 6, my idea of Resident Evil had already been tainted. When I first played Resident Evil 5, I had just come fresh off the boat of Resident Evil 2, 1, and 4 and was ready for more. And more I did not get. I did play this game with a friend and that did make the experience fun, but this was not Resident Evil. This was action-adventure shoot the bad guys game. There was never a moment that I felt any sense of fear. Unlike Resident Evil 4, which was also action-oriented, with that game, there were moments where I was spooked. Not with this game. It was a disappointment because I was expecting Resident Evil and that is not what I got. Still waiting on that Resident Evil 2 remake. If they made it like the GameCube remake but with PS4 graphics, wouldn't that just be peachy?
3,
Remember Rampage, the game where the challenge itself was literally not to get bored before you made it to the end of the game? Seriously, the game would run for like, what, 3 hours? If you were like me, you had no idea that there was a Rampage game before World Tour simply called Rampage. The game was ported over to the NES and, yeah, it had nothing spectacular. You just had one screen to destroy the buildings, and back in the arcade days, just the fact that you could play with 3 players must have been a drawing appeal. With World Tour, it was a much more complex game. The levels would scroll and wasn't a bad game. Then in 2006, images started to appear in magazines of a new Rampage game. Rampage Total Destruction. Looking at the images, I was like, this is gonna be awesome! 3D cities that allow you to go wherever you want, beating the crap out of your friends and buildings? Unfortunately, the game decided to take a page out of the original and restricted players to only one plane of buildings at a time, and unlike the sequels, did not allow for scrolling. This resulted in a game that felt cramped and overall just not fun. I played this game once and never touched it again ever since. It felt cheap, rushed, and overall manipulative. The images in GamePro magazine made the game seem like it was going to be the Rampage game I had always wanted. The game boasted 30 different characters, all of which play the exact same way with some trivial, pointless differences. The voice acting was terrible, the whole idea of the game was terrible. The Rampage games were never meant to be taken seriously. The games were always time wasters or quarter munchers. This game attempted to be more than just that and fell on its face miserably.
2,
Oh man, where do I start with this one? I love Earthworm Jim. I love the games and their humor. This game had no humor, and whatever humor it did try to present seemed like it was trying to rip off the original games. But perhaps the biggest problem with this game was the way it was designed. The original Earthworm Jim game was a side-scroller. You went from point A to point B. With Menace to the Galaxy, the game tried to take a page from the book of Banjo-Kazooie and its notes. You see, those coins right there, you have to collect a certain amount of those before you can exit the stage. The problem? Well, like Banjo and its nodes, if you died, you had to start all over again from zero. Like Banjo, this made the live system pretty worthless, as dying once is pretty much the same thing as getting a game over. However, unlike Banjo, which had balanced difficulty, Menace to the Galaxy suffered from leaps of faith. You have no real way of telling whether you'll be landing on a platform beneath you or if you're going to fall to your doom and have to start all over again. As you progress farther in the game, this becomes a real problem. As much as people complain about Earthworm Jim 3D, at least that game was playable. Sure, it was a mediocre game, but a 5 out of 10 at least. This game is a 3 out of 10 at best. The heartbreaking part was that this was a game I longed to find as a child. I saw it once at a Walmart, asked my mom to buy it for me, and she said we would next week. The very next week, the game wasn't there, and it wasn't until a couple years later that I eventually found it at a flea market, played it, and realized that perhaps I wasn't meant to play the game. Earthworm Jim Menace to the Galaxy, easily the worst Earthworm Jim game ever, and pretty much the game that killed the franchise. Now before I get to number 1, here are a couple honorable mentions. Star Fox Adventures is a game that gets a lot of hate that isn't really well deserved. I mean, it's pretty much a Zelda game with a Star Fox paint job. I like this game, but I'll admit it was a little disappointing to pop this in on my birthday way back when, only to realize that it was nothing like Star Fox 64. But the more I got into it, the more I didn't really care. I liked the planet, I liked the idea, it could have been worse. Street Fighter 2 Anniversary Edition was my first Street Fighter game. It came with Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, which I loved, but what I really wanted was Street Fighter 2, which according to the box made it seem like it was going to be the definitive Street Fighter 2 game. The game was way too hard. The computer blocks like everything, and I only managed to beat the game on easiest difficulty, which was under easy and very easy. Yeah. And I'm not that bad. I mean, I don't know how good I am, but I usually turn the difficulty up on Street Fighter 2 Turbo on Super Nintendo, so I have to be at least decent enough that I don't have to resort to the easiest difficulty. The game was a big disappointment, but at least it included Third Strike. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest gets a lot of hate, and I agree with the hate. I didn't buy this game when it was released, but I was also unaware of its bad reputation. I bought it at a flea market well before the Angry Video Game Nerd made an episode about it. I bought it because I just beat the classic NES series version of the first Castlevania on Game Boy Advance, and I was expecting this game to be just as good, and instead I got a game that was completely different and a major bummer. Alright, and the number one biggest disappointment in video games is...
1.
I love pinball. I love video games. I love Mario video games. A Mario pinball video game with a commercial that was really cool? I couldn't wait to play this game, and what I got was a game that was just not good. Not good at all. The Mario formula did not belong in pinball. The objective of the game was to collect stars and beat bosses. To get to the bosses, you had to open doors with a certain number of stars, like Mario 64. To get the stars, you had to defeat all the bad guys in a single screen, and here's where the game-breaking problem lied. Look at this board right here. You see those Koopas? Well, to get the star, you gotta kill all those Koopas. To kill them, you gotta hit them twice. Hit them once, you knock them over, and a second time to finish the job. The problem is, they get up if you're not quick enough, and as you can clearly see, you got giant mushrooms blocking your way that makes the task much more impossible. Or check this board out. You see that beehive right there? Well, to get in there, you gotta buy a tiny mushroom from an item shop which seldom appears. The mini mushroom lasts you only a limited time, so you can't mess up. However, you see that windmill right there? If you accidentally shoot yourself inside, and once you do, your item is gone automatically. The game was just full of frustratingly bad moments that not only made this a disappointing experience, but it's one of the worst games I have ever played. I remember buying this game and looking at the box art and just feeling excited to play. Just look at it, it makes me want to play every single time even though I already know this game is a pile of crap. That's what makes this the number one disappointing game ever. If I get interested in playing a game I know is bad simply by looking at the box, imagine how disappointed I was as a kid when I first played this game. So those are my top 10 disappointing video games so far, and hopefully this list doesn't change. As always, thanks for watching, and here are the losers.